And we are live. Hello, everyone. Excellent. Good to see that even before I've gone live, I've got one thumbs down on this live stream. Well, everyone else, thank you. I really welcome you here. Glad you can join us today. My name is Martin. I'm from the team at REEDSY, and I'm welcoming you to a very special edition of REEDSY Live, our ongoing series of webinars, where we bring on professionals from world publishing to show you how to write and publish better books. Today, we are bringing back on my colleague, your friend and mine, Tom Bromley, head of learning here at REEDSY, who's got another one of his live editing sessions. I think earlier this week, I want to say on Monday, we sent around an email to all our newsletter subscribers asking them to submit the first chapter or a sample of a book up to 500 words. Where we've gone into the ones that were submitted and we've pulled a small handful and we're going to edit them in front of your very eyes. When I say we, I mean Tom. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not qualified for it. But this is a great opportunity for you to see what goes through an editor's mind when they read a piece of work. And you get to see what goes on. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Let's see who is joining us today. Chris Pitt. They're from North Wales. Fantastic. Beck from the Netherlands, though they are originally American. Jason from Win Air. Fantastic. Ellen is here as well. Joe from Snowy, Michigan. Fantastic. Let's go further down. John from San Francisco. We have Tiger Womble from Lawrence Cure. I imagine that could be your name. Jin Coleman from Mississippi. We have Angela from Cornwall here in the UK. Kynan from Antwerp. There's a lot of Netherlands chat going on there. So maybe the sort of the Dutch contingent is strong today. Helen from Toronto in Canada. Really glad you could all join us. Before I bring on our guests, just a little bit of housekeeping. As folks may have noticed in the chat, there have been a lot of submissions to this. I think we've got nearly 1,000 submissions to this, which is absolutely fantastic. But as you might imagine, this means that not everyone will have theirs read. To be fair, if there were like 50 on there, most people still wouldn't have theirs brought out today. However, this is more than just an opportunity to see your work out there. Hopefully, yours gets chosen, but this is just a good chance for you to hopefully learn, enjoy, and sort of see work being shared in this context here. Fred from Old Orchard Beach in Maine. Barbarella from Sacramento, California. Robin from France. And Bob Freeman from California. Good to see everyone here. Gina says, is this February 20th live session? Gina, today's February 20th and I am live, unless you're watching this later, in which case this is not. If this is February 20th, live. If it is afterwards, not. Okay, now that we've cleared that one up, glad to see everyone's joining. Adamanta, hey, writers and editors and lovers of literature, indeed. Glad if you like books, if you like reading, if you like writing, hopefully today you'll witness something special. Before we start, if I could just implore you, if possible, to give this video, this live stream, a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us get new eyes on this. Plus, you'll be the first to see whenever we announce a new webinar. Oh my god, a second thumbs down. This is a poor form even for me. Brigitte from Denmark. We have Dave from snowy northwest Wisconsin. We have Diane in Central California. Great to see everyone joining. It is now the top of the hour. I have got a little opening sequence which I'll bring on. But yes, let's get this thing started. Welcome to REEDSY Live. Hello, welcome. My name is Martin. I'm from the team at REEDSY, and you are very welcome indeed to REEDSY Live, our ongoing series of webinars where we bring on professionals from the world of publishing to show you how to write and publish better books. Today, we see the return of our live editing sessions with REEDSY's head of learning, Tom Bromley, where folks, viewers at home, will have had the chance to submit samples of their work for the chance to have it live edited right here on this presentation that you're either watching right now or later, but definitely not in the past. Great. Well, we have a lot to get through. I don't want to waste anyone's time, so I'm going to bring on our guest for today. He is an author, he is a ghostwriter, he's an editor, a former publisher, and most importantly, the head of learning here at REEDSY'S, where he's responsible for our premium course, How to Write a Novel. He is also one of Wiltshire's finest. Please welcome Tom Bromley. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Martin. How are you?
I am good. It is getting to the end of February. The days are getting longer, and so I'm getting happier by the day. So, really glad you could join us for another one of these. How is the latest of your How to Write a Novel courses going?
It's good. So actually, so the last Monday we did a live editing session. So we have as part of the course, I do a kind of weekly live kind of masterclass. So I did a live editing session with the students this week and doing another one next week. And actually, it's a really important part of the course for me. And I always find that even if it's not your work that's being edited, you can learn so much by looking at seeing what could be changed in someone else's work. So I think it's a really invaluable part of the process in terms of learning how to write and becoming better writers.
Amazing. So I know you've got a few to go through. A reminder for anyone who's tuning in, if your work gets picked, it doesn't mean it's bad, it doesn't mean it's great. Same thing if it doesn't get picked. I think sometimes we may lose perspective and think that there's a competition and that we're showcasing the best work, but this is just something we're using to demonstrate the process. Okay, I'm going to throw it to this window, and if you need anything, Tom, just let me know.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. It's great to have you here with us. And I hope what I've got to say about these pieces over the next hour or so is kind of really, really useful and help you with your own writing. Though, as Martin was saying earlier, there was about 1,000 submissions. So I've tried to choose a selection in different genres to give you a feel. And each of them, I think, bring up different writing points, which is why I've chosen these. For each of these, what I will do is I will begin by reading the extract out, and then I will go into the details about the writing itself. And this one, as you can see, is called The Time Traveller's Playlist by David, and this is in the genre, he says, of time travel, and it goes as follows. A steady rain drums against a sea of black umbrellas and splashes against the granite headstones that rise like sentinels from the sodden ground. The preacher's voice drones on, but I don't hear the words. Rain is all I hear, filling the heavy silence that hugs me like a shroud. Did you ever notice how it always rains at funerals? My parents' service is no exception, even though the average rainfall in this part of Utah is less than 5 inches per year. A single car accident took them in one cruel blow. No one knows how it happened. Pop had a little lead in his foot now and then, but the sheriff ruled out excessive speed. I need someone to blame for this tragedy. Maybe a coyote ran out in front of them. Maybe a freak gust of wind knocked them off course. Maybe fate just decided to screw me over. Despite my opinions about rain and funerals, I didn't bring an umbrella. The rain on my face does a fine job of hiding the tears of an only child set adrift at the ripe old age of 22. Every time I blink, the world around me blurs as though my eyes refuse to adjust to this new reality. My name is Angus Walker. I don't know what my parents were thinking when they named their newborn son after a cow. Maybe they thought it was funny. The kids at school sure did. Entering high school, 50 pounds overweight with a name like Angus, I might as well have had a sign on my forehead that read, "Bully me." I shed some of the weight over the years, but the damage was done. I stand graveside in the rain, hands jammed into my pockets, desperately trying not to feel anything. Not the dampness seeping into my bones, not the lump in my throat, not the fact that I have to bury both of my parents at the same time. I'm failing miserably. My mind wanders. Memories I didn't ask for creep in like the rain that leaks down my collar. Mum's laugh, Pop's calloused hands, the fights, the silences. The way we were never the perfect family, but also somehow couldn't let go of each other. I reckon it was love. That's what families have, whether they like each other or not. Don't get me wrong, I loved my parents, even if I felt like the son they never had. I should have been bigger, stronger, and able to ride a horse or throw a football. The only thing I'm any good at is playing the guitar, which isn't much of use on a ranch. Though, Through it all, the underlying currents of love kept me getting out of bed every morning. Doesn't matter now, they're gone, and I'm an orphan, alone and unloved, in a world where I don't fit in. Perhaps if my girlfriend stood by my side, her hand in mine, I'd feel different. But she doesn't exist. Okay, I think this is a really good kind of beginning to a story. And one of the things I will say about all the pieces, which I think is a key question when you're looking at beginnings of books and thinking where your opening chapter lies, is that question, why now? And I think for each of these pieces tonight, I will ask that question, why are we dropping in the story at this particular moment? What is happening that's significant? And here I think there is the significance clearly from the death of the parents. That feels a kind of crucial moment in this character Angus's life. So it begins in a good, strong place. I would say, though, that the other element of this, which I think is crucial, this is a book that's based around time travel. We got the title, The Time Traveler's Playlist, which I think is a really, really good and interesting title. But we don't have much sense in this opening 500 words or so of any hint about that, of what is to come. So although I think in terms of answering the why now question, it does it pretty well, I would have liked at least a hint or a suggestion of where this is going to come in and how that central kind of theme is going to play out. I'm going to talk about various things in this extract, but the three in particular I want to look at is firstly the use of imagery, secondly the relationship between what's happening in the present and kind of backstory and what happens in the past, and thirdly the kind of the flow and rhythm of kind of some sentences. So let's look at imagery at the start. I always think on the course when I teach, I always say I think imagery is a really kind of rich part of the mix in the writing. So it's a very powerful tool. It's a tool for emphasis, but I always think it should be used kind of sparingly for effect. I think that's the first thing I would say about imagery. And then the second thing is I think they should feel distinct and kind of separate from what is going on. So if we look at this opening kind of paragraph here, we've sort of got three images going on. So firstly, in that opening sentence, we've got a steady rain drums against a sea of black umbrellas. So with this idea of the sea as being the first image in the piece. And they splash against the granite headstones that rise like sentinels from the sodden ground. And then the final sentence in this paragraph, rain is all I hear, filling the heavy silence that hugs me like a shroud. So immediately I think that's too many images in one paragraph. I would personally have one of those at most, possibly two, possibly you could keep the sea one, but I think the rising like sentinels and hugging me like a shroud is too many in quick succession. They sort of get in the way of each other. I often think with images, I do like an image in an opening paragraph. I think that they can work really well when they're at the end of a sentence and at the end of a paragraph to kind of round things off. So possibly I would take out the one about the rising like sentinels and keep the one at the end kind of hugging me like a shroud. I think that would be the way I would do it. And then by taking those others out, then when you have that third one at the end, then that has kind of maximum impact as a result. I also think the imageries should be distinct. Now, where is this? I'm going to find this now. Yeah, here we go. My mind wanders, memories I didn't ask for creep in like the rain that leaks down my collar. And I think this image is obviously pretty close to what is going on in the scene with the rain. And I think this is the wrong image to include. I think images need to be kind of separate and distinct. So personally, I would look at kind of changing that kind of image as well. And as I say, I think images are really, really good, really, really important part of writing, but use them sparely. They're a really rich ingredient, so use them for kind of maximum effect where you can. As we go through the scene, there's a sort of balance between what's happening in the here and now and then how we're getting that information in. And I think that's one of the challenges when you're writing an opening scene in a story is how much information you're giving to the reader and whereabouts to stick it in. So in the opening paragraph, we've got this detail about the rain that kind of works kind of extremely well. The second paragraph here, I think, sort of starts in the same way as the beginning here. So then we don't quite get as much movement as I would like in the piece. It doesn't kind of move us forward as much as possible. I think here we then have this detail about my parents' service is no exception, even though the average rainfall in this part of Utah is less than 10 so less than 5 inches per year. We then have the detail, this here, I'm not sure I can do it over the corner here, but this is the sort of the flashback. This is the detail about about what happened. And I think here, for me, the order is wrong, because having had that detail about what happened in the car crash, we then go back to the detail about the rain again. So I personally would move this paragraph up. I can't quite see this at the same time, but having that kind of riffing around kind of rain and funerals, keep that together. And then I think this line here, every time I blink, the world around me blurs as though my eyes refuse to adjust to this new reality. And then, having said refusing to adjust to this new reality, then you go on to this: a single car accident took them in one blow. And I think sometimes when you're going back and looking at beginnings and thinking about how to retweak them, part of it can be around the sequencing and the order of the material that you're giving the reader. But I think if this piece is rejigged like that, then we have the detail about what happened in the car accident, and then we sort of sit here with detail around the character and the backstory. So having gone from this sentence here, maybe fate just decided to screw me over, we then go down to here, my name is Angus Walker, and that feels like a kind of nice introduction. And then as we go back over the page, then here, now we're back into the present again. I stand graveside in the rain, and then we have a little bit more in the present here, and then we're sort of back in the past here again here, and a bit more kind of thinking. So possibly here, in terms of the balance, I would like a little bit more in terms of what's happening in the present. But I think if you sort of rejig it slightly in the way I suggest, then there's a sort of bigger block in the present at the start to get things up and running. Then we go back into the past and a bit of backstory, and then this bit here I think should probably be expanded out to keep us more in the moment before we kind of go back into a little bit more detail. The other thing I was going to say about this piece is the rhythm of the sentences, and this is when sentences or clauses in sentences are quite short in succession. And I think if you have too many in quick succession, or they're too similar, then it feels, or it can feel, a little bit staccato in terms of the rhythm, rather than having that nice rhythm and flow that you want in the writing. So if we look at this paragraph here at the top of the page, we have, I stand graveside in the rain, hands jammed into my pockets, desperately not trying to feel anything. They're all sort of roughly kind of similar in length. Not the dampness seeping into my bones, similar again, not the lump in my throat, not the fact that I have to bury both my parents at the same time. So here, I think you've got too many sentences and clauses at the same length, so you don't have that nice ebb and flow rhythm. It feels too similar. And if you look at this paragraph a little bit further down here, my mind wanders. Then we have this run of very short clauses and sentences in the middle. Mom's laugh, Pop's calloused hands, the fights, the silences, the way we were never the perfect family, but also somehow couldn't let go of each other. Here, I sort of think this works because you've got these short sentences bookended by a longer sentence before and a longer sentence afterwards. So you've got this sort of pause in the middle, sort of bang, 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 and then you kind of flow out again. And I think that works kind of quite effectively as a piece. There was one more element of this I wanted to mention, which is where you're using repetition for effect. Sorry, I appreciate I'm picking around a little bit on this extract, but if we look at this detail about how his parents died, we have this repetition of maybe a coyote ran out in front of them, maybe a freak gust of wind knocked them off course, maybe fate just decided to screw me over. I teach a session on the course about what I call the rule of three, where if you have three elements in succession, it's the third element that then has this additional element of emphasis to it. And if you can get that third element to have a little bit of emotion in there in particular, then that works really well in terms of getting that detail to land. And here I think that the author's done that brilliantly. We've got the coyote first, so we've got like detail, and then we have the emotion here. Maybe fate just decided to screw me over. And that sentence works because of those two sentences that have gone before. And I think sometimes when you're looking at writing, thinking about how you can use that rule of three for emphasis, I think is a really, really useful technique to have in the mix as well. So yeah, thank you for sending that piece in, and I hope those comments are useful. I'm going to take a sip of water. I think Martin will
Oh,
really.
I can sort of cover for here. People are liking your appraisal, although there is some stuff kicking off. Marie Dyer says no good author uses contractions, which I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you might be trolling. Although, yeah, I think that's demonstrably not true. I hope you are enjoying it. And Tom, yeah, so some people here asking, they're hoping you'll do a non-fiction one at some point. This one is specifically, I think, fiction. But yeah, maybe at some point, because you do ghostwrite memoirs, so imagine you can sort of dip into that at some point.
Yeah, and I was a non-fiction commissioning editor for many years. So yeah, I can certainly, that would be a nice one to do in the future, looking at memoir as well. I suppose the comments here are more thinking about how you get the beginning of a novel kind of specifically to work. If that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
With contracts, so I was thinking with writing, any rules that are set in stone, I'm always slightly wary of. I think writing rules are there to be broken.
Yeah, especially for like fiction, it's like you can start every single sentence with the word "but." If it works, you can end
Yeah.
it with a preposition all the time. Should you care to?
I,
Cool.
I was reading a style guide for Network Rail this week, which is the rail body here in the UK, called Speak Passenger, which was like an updated style guide. And in that, they said it's now okay to use, and but and whatever at the start of a sentence, because that's how people speak. So that was their official style guide. They put this into print.
The rail system's going to hell in a handbasket, Tom. Back in my day, we could count on them. Anyway, have you got your next one?
Yep, I'm going to put that up. Let me just bring that through here. Yep. I'm all ready to go. So this is a piece by Jane Armour, and this is a fantasy piece called To Love a Dragon. And this starts as follows. If she survived this ride in the red cortege, she would kill her brother. Of course, no woman had ever survived. Fear and anger battled inside her like twin flames. Shivering in the red silk dress of the sacrifice, she stared straight ahead as they rode through village after village on their way to the serrated mountain range where death awaited. Silent villagers lined their route with bowed heads as their prince led his sister in the hated red cortege. Keeping her back ramrod straight and ignoring her rattling chains, she refused to show the terror threatening to consume her. Nursing her fury to keep it on a tight rein, she fought to keep panic at bay. When the right opportunity presented itself, she'd need all its fire to strengthen her. She would not die like some mewling victim. They rode solemn and silent, save for the sharp jingle of chains and harnesses. The steady rhythm of hoofbeats on loamy soil toiled the hours as they marched resolutely towards her destiny. Whenever one of their escorts caught her eye, they'd quickly look away. These men had no voice in this world, nor the courage to defy their prince. She hoped their shame drove deep into their souls, so deep that it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Or perhaps they felt only relief. Today, it wasn't one of their daughters being fed to the dragon. Her father, King Shaland, hunted while his only daughter was fed to the dragon, and her brother, Prince Godfrey, rode up front, leading a small band of red-clad warriors, taking her to her death. Her loathsome brother couldn't resist gloating even when he'd helped her mount her horse, his eyes bright with unnatural excitement. He was a mean bully of a man whose only friends were sycophantic social climbers, and he deserved every one of them. Her wrists were red raw from the cold iron binding her hands to the pommel, and her feet were numb, chained underneath her horse's belly. She would not go quietly, but she must bide her time and choose her moment wisely. If only she'd lain with someone last year and got herself with child, she wouldn't be here today. But princesses didn't do that, did they? How had Godfrey convinced their father that sacrificing one princess would equal the 10 sacrifices the upper kingdoms gave the dragons yearly? She'd believed her father when he said he'd ensure she was never chosen. Instead, she'd campaigned to end it on behalf of others, never dreaming her time would come. How naive. Leaving the mist-shrouded forest behind, they picked up the pace as they started out across the dragon-scorched lands. Large tracts where they dared not grow crops lay black and ruined. Soon she'd be at the foot of the mountains that separated her father's kingdom from the realm of dragons, ready to climb to her death, not if she could help it. Okay, another really interesting and strong kind of beginning to a narrative, and this is the one I think out of probably all the pieces tonight that probably answers that question most clearly. Why now? We've got this protagonist here. Anya is being taken. She's going to be sacrificed to this dragon. So immediately she's stuck in a situation that she needs to get herself out of. So in terms of why we're being thrown into the story at this point, that is apparent and that is clear. We also have right from this opening sentence. Sorry, a second. Let's move. Let's go back to the right piece. We start with this relationship, this fight between the protagonist and her brother. And I think this opening sentence as a beginning to a story is brilliant and set this up. If she survived this ride in the red cortege, she would kill her brother. And I think that contrast between surviving and killing here, I think works really strongly and really, really effectively. And I think as a beginning, that setup works kind of really, really well. I'm going to talk about three things on this piece in particular. The first of these is the importance and the use of description. I think particularly when you're writing kind of fantasy or pieces set in kind of different kind of worlds or kind of locations. Secondly, a little bit about the use of kind of sounds and the different senses, which I think is important too in this piece. And then thirdly, I'll go on and talk about the use of kind of short paragraphs for emphasis as well. I think with description to start with, I think this is absolutely crucial when you're writing a kind of fantasy scene. And I appreciate it's a tricky balance to write. I mean, I write kind of contemporary fiction. I think the most recent one I wrote was set in London. So that's quite easy to set. So even if I don't do much description, most readers will probably have a idea what that might look like. If you're setting your piece in a different world, then you're sort of starting from scratch. So here you've got to get that detail across, but not to the point where you're slowing the kind of the material down at the same time. Here, for me, I think that there's scope for more of this detail to come in, particularly because we've got this got central character being taken through the lands to where the dragon is. So here we've got as they rode through village after village on the way to the serrated mountain edge range where death awaited. So we've got the chance to do this. This description here, we've got the villagers lining the route with their bowed heads. Again, that feels quite a natural place to put description in without it kind of slowing the story down too much. And if I scroll just down to the end of the section here, I think here as well, this to me feels like a moment where that could be written out kind of more fully. So leaving the mist-shrouded forest behind, we haven't really had very much of the mist-shrouded forest at all at this point. The dragon-scorched lands, I think that feels a moment to kind of bring that out. Not least to heighten the tension and fear that the protagonist is facing about what she's going to come up to next. And then the foot of the mountains here, a little bit more detail and description there. So I think the first thing I would say with this piece is to get more description in the setting wherever possible. There is some detail which I really like about the use of kind of sounds and different senses. So I think we've got the villagers being kind of silent here with the bowed heads. And then as we go down, we've got these rattling chains, which kind of works well. And then we have that sort of repeated here, the sharp jingle of chains and harnesses. But we've got this repetition of silent there. You've got the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Nice detail. I think it's good to bring in the different senses when you're writing description. But again, I think kind of more can be done than the author is probably doing right at this moment. I talked in the first piece about the importance of if you're using an image in the opening paragraph, that having it right at the end is a really good place for it to land. And I think generally thinking about ends of sentences and ends of paragraphs, particularly ends of opening paragraphs, is a really, really important kind of thing to kind of think about. It sounds a kind of small detail, but here we've got this, she's heading for the serrated mountain range where death awaited. And actually, the key word I think you want there is death. I think awaited feels doesn't feel as dynamic or as strong a word to end the scene or the sentence on. So here I would be looking to rejig this round. So something like, I don't know, da, 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 where she faces her death or something. So you've got death at the end as that closing point. And I think when you do that, then you've got this nice link back to the beginning here. You've got this sort of bookending of this kind of this threat to the protagonist at the start and at the end. I think that works, or that would work extremely effectively. I mentioned a little bit about the use of kind of paragraphs. So here we've got paragraphs of a sort of roughly similar length here at the start, which creates a kind of rhythm and feel to the material. And then you have these kind of short paragraphs that come in. And I think when you've got shorter paragraphs, again, that's a really good technique for emphasis, and they work well because of what has come on before. So actually these paragraphs have got, steadily longer, and then bang, or perhaps they only felt relief. Today it wasn't one of their daughters being fed to the dragon. So that line stands out because this paragraph is short and because it's come after these kind of longer paragraphs before it. And I think it's a technique, if there's a moment you want to land particularly strongly, it's a good technique to have in there. And by contrast, if we look over the page, here we have sort of a couple of paragraphs that are sort of similar length, and then we have this run of very short paragraphs with questions. If only she'd lain with someone last year and got herself a child, she wouldn't be there today. But princes didn't do that, did they? So that's question 1. How had Godfrey convinced their father that sacrificing one princess would equal the 10 sacrifices? 2, she believed her father when he said it ensured she was never chosen. And then 3, and then we have this last one, how naive. So the how naive does stand out because it's particularly short, but I think rhythm-wise, for me, that run of 4 short paragraphs is almost one too many. And I think in particular because this one is slightly longer, so rather than having just one sentence, you've got 2 sentences in here, and you haven't got a question in there. Having had this build of question, bang, how naive, I think that would work more effectively. So I would be looking personally at kind of rejigging this round slightly, and I think if you do that, then this moment will land as a result. I think if you've got short paragraphs which are sort of bookended by longer paragraphs, then they stand out and have that emphasis. If you have a run of very short paragraphs, then that impact is lost a bit. So just be aware of that as you are going through. But I have to say, I think in terms of setting up a story, in terms of the protagonist, in terms of the situation they face, in terms of the question of why now, I think this piece does this kind of very, very strongly, and probably all this stuff, particularly on the description things, you can go back and retweak and make stronger in the rewrites. But getting that story down at the start is really important, and I think that Jane has done it extremely well. Okay. Have a sip of water.
I think it was someone has mentioned that, with fantasy novels, it feels like, a lot of what we're sort of taught by everyone we've ever had on is like, get to the heart of the action, get to the story. Why are you dropping in, the reader in now? And with a lot of like fantasy and science fiction, like there is a tendency to see more prologues, I suppose, which sort of goes against that. But as someone pointed out, like with Indo genres, they reckon that, well, the readers have more of a tolerance, if not an expectation, of that sort of level of world building and prologuery.
Yeah, but I think you can drop it in. So actually, I think there Jane did it really well, that you have that dilemma at the start. If she survives, she's going to kill her brother. So you have that, dynamic kind of tension right at the mix. And then because she's in this scene where that protagonist is being, taken to her death, you've then got the space to naturally put the description in rather than it feeling like, okay, I'm going to have to slow the story down and stop it and give all this world-building information. I think the way it's set up, she's actually she's done it really well structurally, so it's just kind of fleshing out a bit more than what is already there. But yeah, I always slightly feel for kind of science fiction fantasy writers that they've got a slightly harder task than perhaps some genre writers when they're setting their stall out at the beginning.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, if you're doing like a long series, like if you're in book 3, there's almost certainly an expectation that you should welcome in your new readers, and like, so do you have to do all the table setting again? And then you'll end up having to balance, like, the readers who've read book 1 and 2 recently don't want another explanation of how the ins and outs of the city works, but you also need to know it. So Cool.
Yeah.
You got your next one ready?
Yeah, no, I'm ready with the next one. We can go. So we are going on to literary fiction with this next one. This is Hayley Shucker, and this is the piece called Broken Dreams and Patchwork Things. Anya Edelman only believed in flesh and blood, but over the past few months, she'd come to accept that ghosts lurked around every corner of her apartment. Some ghosts were friendlier than others. The smell of sandalwood, the framed pictures on the walls, the empty bed. Too many things reminded her of Henry, which distracted her on the best days and on the worst, wrapped their spindly shadow hands around her neck and squeezed, a sensation she no longer ran from. To escape the ghosts, Anya had become partial to spending evenings at Books Aplenty, a struggling bookstore a few blocks away. Recently, she'd taken up reading the classics, believing that at her age she should make the time. On the Goldilocks scale of embracing depression, Anna Karenina was just right. Knowing the ending didn't ruin it for Anya, nor did death. The story was always about the journey, and like her Russian heroine, Anya's story was coming to an end. Books Aplenty was usually quiet, and once they learned she was widowed, Bry and Jeremy informed their employees that Anya Edelman, the wrinkling old woman, was not to be kicked out, hustled, or coerced into buying books she might never finish. That last part tweaked her at first. 81 was young. She drove around town, albeit not late, due to her night blindness, and her cognitive ability hadn't waned. If anything, she was sharper. She did crosswords, various word puzzles, and Sudoku nearly daily. And thanks to Henry's gambling skills, she learned to read people's various tics. Eventually, Anya realised that overprotectiveness wasn't so much about her old age, but a manifestation of their fear of ageing. The acidic smell of coffee momentarily overpowered the fresh smell of new books. A young man with a scraggly beard walked by her with a disposable cup of freshly brewed dark roast. In an attempt to compete with the chain stores, Bry and Jeremy began offering free coffee, which didn't seem to help. The coffee was frequently burnt or stale, encouraging people to linger without buying anything. They discontinued their unlimited free Wi-Fi for the same reason. People often found ways to outstay their welcome. She was one to talk. For the last 3 nights, Anya had closed the store. Much like a drunk sitting on a bar stool at 2 a.m., she was unfazed by last call, seeking shelter from the real world that existed outside of the jingle door. She checked her watch. 6:30. With half an hour until closing, it appeared tonight would be no different. She was expecting a call from Melinda to talk about Henry. Melinda, Anya's closest friend for 30 years, wanted to mark the anniversary of his passing, so much that one would think she'd been married to him instead of Anya. She'd entertained no idea of attending another dog and pony show. Instead, she remained curled up in a comfortable chair, clinging to the depressed woman, keeping her company. Okay, I really like this as a beginning of a story. I think that the writing is really kind of lovely and crisp. It tackles quite difficult and kind of interesting in themes, but does it in a way that overall I think feels kind of sensitive and kind of well handled. I get a good sense of our main protagonist, kind of Anya. I think when you're writing kind of literary fiction in particular, there is possibly a little bit more emphasis towards character sometimes and towards kind of story. So I think here that the author sets it up kind of extremely well. I'm going to talk about a few things here in particular. The main one I want to talk about is the balance between what I call kind of general versus specific. So stuff that's happening kind of generally, and then stuff where suddenly you're in the moment and in a scene and in a kind of specific kind of moment. And I think here you get a sort of switch in the piece between talking about things that kind of what usually happens or what normally happens, and then where we're getting in a moment. So if we look in this opening paragraph, we talk about, Anya only believed in flesh and blood, but over the past few months, she'd come to accept that ghosts lurked around every corner of her apartment. So we're talking here generally about what's taken place over the past few months. And then there's the second paragraph here. Anya had become partial to spending evenings at Books of Plenty. Recently, she'd taken up reading the classics. So again, we're sort of getting closer to the present here, but we're still not quite in the specific and in the moment. And so I'm always slightly wary about words like usually. Books of Plenty was usually quiet, and once they'd learned she was widowed, then we discussed that Anya couldn't be kind of kicked out, and so we then have this description of how she's still got her faculties, and she's driving fine, and she's kind of sharp, her brain is sharp, and all this kind of stuff. And it's only really actually when we get over the page into here that we then get a specific moment. The acidic smell of coffee momentarily overpowered the fresh smell of new books. And we have this young man with a scraggly beard walking by with a disposal cup of freshly brewed dark roast. That is a little bit of the specific scene here. And then we're back into talking more generally about what Brian and Jeremy are trying to do to compete with the chain stores. And then here we're back into not sort of in the moment, but not quite in the moment for the past 3 nights. And it's only really where we then get down into this last paragraph, and we have this line here. With half an hour until closing, it appeared tonight would be no different. So really here, we've got lovely detail and description, which I really, really like. But we haven't got too much in this opening scene about what is happening specifically in the here and now. So that question of why we're dropping the reader in now on this particular night, we haven't quite got in yet. I'm assuming that if it said it appeared tonight would be no different, that means that I'm guessing that tonight is going to be different in some kind of way. So whether that is the call from this person, Melinda, or something else is going to happen, I'm guessing maybe that, the man with the scraggly beard, nothing wrong with scraggly beards, I should say, but I'm assuming he might be significant. He seems to be, the one other character who's there, who's in the mix as well. So when you're looking at beginnings, I think having a little bit of kind of summary is useful, but I would, where possible, focus it more around the here and now. So rather than saying, Andrea usually went to the bookshop, or for the past 3 nights she's been doing this, tell us about this specific occasion, and then explain that this is how it normally is, but this is the example to show that. And I think if you start in the moment and then go back, then that will feel stronger. And if you think about those other pieces, the fantasy piece was very much in the here and now, which is why it had its kind of strength in terms of the plot and story. And the first piece, the time traveler one, sort of went kind of back and forth. So here, I think that balance just needs rejigging just a little bit, I would say. There's some really, really lovely writing in here, some tiny little details which I really like. And the first one is this use of these 2 words here, only and over. Anya Edelman only believed in flesh and blood, but over the past few months, she'd come to accept that ghosts lurked around every corner of her apartment. So in that rule of 3 way, I'm talking about, you've got this build here with 1 and 2, you've got that repetition, and then the third part of the sentence here is slightly different, and that's the one that has the kind of emotional resonance. She'd come to accept that ghosts lurked around every corner of her apartment. And then I think this detail here is gorgeous as another sort of rule of kind of 3 here as well. Some ghosts were friendlier than others. The smell of sandalwood obviously reminding her of Henry. Maybe that was his son that he wore. The framed pictures on the walls feels quite warm, and then the empty bed is the one that feels the harder memory, and that's the one that feels less friendly than the other ones. Again, thinking about what is landing at the end of a run of 3, but also at the end of a sentence, and thinking about the sounds as well. The sounds are such a tiny point, but it does make a difference. That sort of duh at the end, the empty bed, feels nice and strong and decisive. So in the way that only and over is giving you that nice rhythm in that opening sentence, here that sort of duh at bed at the end closes that sentence off kind of really, really kind of nicely. you've then got this image at the end of the paragraph. I paused slightly over the image. I mean, I think it's real. It's well drawn, but I wasn't completely certain on it. It feels quite dark, and so it has quite a kind of shock factor as a result. That also has this kind of slight confusion where it says it's a sensation that she no longer ran from, and then immediately in this next paragraph, that first sentence, to escape the ghost, and you had become partial to spending evenings. So either she's not running from this thing, or she is. So I think that feels slightly confusing to me. And I think thinking about linkages in a scene are kind of really, really important. And a similar one, I would say, was towards the end of this first page, where she talks about, thanks to Henry's gambling skills, she learned to read people's various tics. And then eventually, over the top of the page, she realised that overprotectiveness wasn't so much about her old age, but a manifestation of their fear of ageing. I think that's really, really nice as a sentence and as a sentiment. But if she's learned how to read people's tics, that sense of eventually doesn't quite feel right to me. It feels like she should be sharper and noticing that more quickly, perhaps, than she's doing at the moment. And then in a similar way, which I didn't quite get, we have this detail about this, this coffee is not very nice. And then we have this phrase, the coffee was frequently burnt or stale, encouraging people to linger without buying anything. If the coffee is not very nice, I'm not sure why you would linger further on. I mean, I can see that if you had unlimited free Wi-Fi, that you might stay in the shop longer than you need to buy the books. If the coffee's nice, you might stay and carry on drinking the coffee and enjoy yourself. If the coffee's not so nice, why would you hang about? So I didn't quite understand that there. So I think that probably just needs kind of tightening up just a little bit. What else I was going to say on this? I love this detail about the Goldilocks scale of embracing depression. Anya Karenina was just right. I think that's kind of really, really strong. I sort of paused in, knowing the ending didn't ruin it for Anya, nor did death. I didn't think that was completely clear whether that was her own death coming up or what precise that was. So that probably needed clarifying a little bit. And we have that slight repetition here where we say Anya's story was coming to an end there. But one other sentence I wanted to mention, I think there's lots of nice sentences here, but again, this detail and this rhythm and the rule of three, where the two employees in the bookshop say that Anya was not to be kicked out, one, hustled, two, or three, coerced into buying books she might never finish. So again, because that's the third element, that's the one that has most impact and lands kind of strongly as a result. But I think overall, I think this is a really strong start to a story, particularly on the character side. I think possibly getting to the plot a little bit more quickly would be good, and bringing in more of the actual specific moment rather than telling us how things kind of usually happened, I think would make this a slightly more dynamic beginning. But the writing is really, really strong, and I got a really, really good sense of the character from the start. So well done, Hayley. I really enjoyed reading that piece.
Cool. All right. I believe you may have one more to finish on, but I'm thinking perhaps now could be a time for a commercial break where we could throw to our sponsors, us, REEDSY.
It says yes. We've got the How to Write a Novel course. We have our next. You can watch it ticking down live. Our next cohort starts on March the 3rd. So you've got 10 days if you're interested in signing up. This is a 3-month writing course, as you probably know by now, 101 days. You get a daily video lesson from me. We work through all the main kind of writing kind of topics over that period. Have a weekly kind of live class, some with live editing like this, some with masterclasses, some with kind of guest authors. We have cohorts, so you're working through the material at the same time as the students have the chance to kind of share and feedback on work. And I think the other thing I would say is the aim of the course really is that we want you to get to the end of a first draft by the end of by the end of the 101 days. So that's the goal, and most people do the course do get there. So if this is the year, if this is the time where you're thinking, okay, I want to hit that milestone and do that in a concentrated way where you've got that accountability because you're with other people, then certainly do give it a go. And I can see there that the course fee there, the full price is $12.49, but I'm sure Martin has some magic coupon or button.
Oh, yeah. If you go to the description in the video, there's going to be a code for $250 off the tuition fee, which is valid until this Sunday. So yeah, that class starts in just about 10 days as the ticket goes. You can go to reedsy.com/learning and check out what's on the syllabus, what you can expect. If anyone watching here has taken it, let us know how you have found it. But yes, it is there, available for you, and check out all the other stuff we have to offer as well. We'll repeat the code at the end if you stick around for that. But yeah, we have one more, Tom.
We do. I'm ready to go. So we're going to finish with a crime thriller by Dennis, and this is a piece called Inkwell. And as you can see here, we start the action in New York City in 1964. Metal upon metal. A cell door opens. The double snick of handcuffs. The rattle of heavy chains mixes with the plodding of feet. An engine starts, a transport bus. As the engine idles, exhaust filling the morning air, a chained individual approaches. Thomas H. Wells, in his mid-50s, is a prominent figure in the newspaper industry and being indicted on murder charges. Thomas seems uninterested with the proceedings as he's loaded onto a transport bus for his court hearing. Thomas is pushed to the back of the bus and secured in a transportation cell. A hiss of compressed air releases from the brakes. The engine throttles to life as the bus pulls away. After a series of surface streets, the prisoner transport bus climbs a freeway on-ramp and merges with traffic. Thomas H. Wells, notorious, infamous. Thomas sits calm, hands clasped together as he stares off with cold, calculating eyes. His hair is medium length, thick and straight, well oiled with facial hair that adds to his menace. A thick moustache that curls upwards at both ends and a pointed soul patch below. He wears the clothes of the accused, jail blues. Thomas's motion for bail has been denied this time. This isn't his indictment. I think this isn't his first indictment, but anyway. 5 armed guards occupy the front of the bus, selected for their attention to policy and procedure. Everything by the book, right down to the use of latex gloves to avoid direct skin contact. 2 guards sit opposite one another, holding a shotgun each, both scanning outside the bus for anything suspicious. The driver grips the wheel tightly, eyes on the road. The senior guard's eyes are closed, bored with the routine. The last of the guards is drenched in sweat, nervously looking around. After riding a time in silence, Thomas addresses the bus. Gentlemen. His neutral American accent is clear and powerful, commanding. I say, gentlemen, quiet back there, shotgunner 1. Now, no need to be rude. It's been peaceful thus far. Yeah, well, the second shotgunner says, let's keep it that way. Thomas remains silent for a moment. I was hoping to make a stop before my hearing. Change out of these clothes, you understand? The senior guard responds, just shut up, will you? Thomas's expression hardens. What do you say to $10,000 each? The guards glance at one another, not yet dismissing the idea. They remain silent. The offer hangs in the air. Perspiration thickens on the brow of the nervous guard, pupils dilated. Thomas looks at each of them in turn. Fine, let's make it a little more interesting. $100,000 to the man who kills his partners and sets me free. Oh hell, let's make it 2 for the trouble. The guards look at one another with apprehension, suspicion gnawing at them. Greed is a good incentive for betrayal. Okay, well, I'm a crime thriller fan anyway, but I think this is a really, really strong start to a story, and I think once again that question of why now is very much answered here in this mix. We've got this character Thomas; he's on his way to court, and I think as a reader, you want to read on. It's a shame we only had the first 500 words because I want to know what was going to happen in this truck with the different guards, whether they would take the money or not. So you're setting up, creating that dilemma right at the start, introducing who I presume is going to be one of the main characters in the book. Various things I want to talk about in this piece, but the first one is I think the use of description. I think is fantastic, and what I particularly like about it as a start is that rather than giving the reader kind of physical details, we start with this use of sound. Metal upon metal, a cell door opens, the double snick of handcuffs, the rattle of heavy chains mixes with the plodding of feet. So here you're getting the sounds, and because you're starting with the sounds rather than the visual detail, I think it forces the reader to use their imagination a little bit more. I always say that one of the secrets of writing, and the reason that kind of reading works so well, is when the writer gives the reader that little bit of space for them to use their imagination, and that's really where the magic of kind of reading happens. And here I think that the author does that kind of brilliantly. You've got that use of sound, which means you have to think about what this situation kind of looks like, and then that carries on in the next bit here. An engine starts a transport bus. As the engine idles, exhaust filling the morning air, a chained individual approaches. So as the beginning here, immediately I think we're kind of captured and kind of taken in by what is going on. I think at this point I wouldn't say who the character is. So we've got Thomas H. Wells introduced here, and then we have this little bit of detail about him, and I think this is the wrong moment to bring him in. I would have this kind of, a chained individual approaches. He seems uninterested with the proceedings as he's led on the transport bus. For his court hearing, he's pushed to the back of the bus and secured a transportation cell. So have this little bit of mystery to start about who this person is. We then go back to the sounds again, and then when we are introduced to the person here, Thomas H. Wells, notorious, infamous, it will have kind of more impact as a result. And here I've talked a lot tonight about this idea of the kind of the rule of three, but you've got that sort of 1, 2 detail, and then 3 bang the introduction. So I would personally just hold back slightly on who this character is and just let that kind of build a little bit. And then, then this is the moment, then I would, we're talking about how he looks, and this would be the moment to say, who he is and why he's, whether he's been indicted, his role in the newspaper industry, whatever it is. Good, nice kind of specific detail, not too much, but enough there for the reader to extrapolate out. I love that detail about the clothes being jail blues. I think that works kind of very strong and very, very effectively. So all of that is really nicely set up. And what's good here as well is that we don't talk about the other characters in the bus kind of particularly at this point. We're focused on Thomas, the prisoner, and it's only once he's been introduced that we then go into the mix down here at the bottom, and then we talk about the other guards in the piece. So I think as a setup, it works kind of very, very well. But as I say, I think probably I would just not mention him by name at this point, and certainly this detail here feels the wrong moment to kind of add that in. I would save that for kind of later on, rather than kind of bring that in right now. I think as the bus is going, I would have liked a little bit more kind of New York, or wherever it is they are kind of driving from and to at this point. He's merging with traffic. We're set back in the 1960s. Can we have a little bit more detail about what else is on the road, what the detail is looking like? As well as I'm just thinking, I went to see the Bob Dylan film quite recently, A Complete Unknown, and that captures kind of New York from that period extremely well. So just a little flash of detail, I think, as the bus is driving, I think would work well. And a little bit like that fantasy scene earlier on with the character on the way to being sacrificed with the dragon. When you have those moments of movement in a piece that allow you to get landscape and detail, and do make the most of those as you're going along. We then switch in the scene to the detail about these 5 armed guards, and then we sort of tells what they're doing each of them. So say everyone by the book, right down to the use of latex gloves to avoid direct skin contact. And then the details we've got about them all is it's all about them looking. So we've got the first 2 with the shotguns scanning outside the bus for anything suspicious. They've got the driver with the eyes on the road. Senior guard's eyes are closed. The last one is nervously looking around. That all feels slightly repetitious to me. I would probably kind of mix up the details from each of them just a little bit more. I think that would be more interesting. And the other thing I would say as well is when you've got characters looking, that feels a little bit passive and a bit observational rather than active. So I would probably just change the details about each of them there just a little bit. And then we get into the action. So having introduced the scene, we've introduced the protagonist, Thomas, and then we've introduced these other characters. Now we have the action with Thomas kind of addressing the bus. And here I would just notice where you've got detail associated with the dialogue before the dialogue. So at the start here, we've got, after riding a time slot, Thomas addresses the bus. Then we have the talk here. We have, detail here about shotgun one behind here. The second shotgunner says halfway through the piece, so that doesn't really interrupt the scene. And then it shifts. So we have Thomas remains silent for a moment. I was hoping to make a stop before hearing. Then if you look here, the senior guard responds. Thomas' expressions hardens. Thomas looks at them, each of them in turn. And I think when you've got this detail before the characters speak, what it does is it slows down the rhythm and flow of the conversation. And it may be that there's moments where that's done for a reason. Thomas remains silent for a moment. So you've got a gap there before the speech. So that makes sense. But these ones here, the senior guard responds. I don't think that works quite right. I would have, him coming straight out with that and have that afterwards just to keep that flow up. Also interesting about this expression hardening. What do you say to $10,000 each? At that point, he's trying to be kind of charming and offer them something. So why is the expression hardening? I wasn't quite sure on that one in particular. But I like this sense of build. And I think probably if there was a little bit more time, I would just create a little bit more build on this moment here, because here's where the drama is really ratcheting up. And you've got that sort of raising of the money, starts at $10,000. Then he goes up to $100,000, and it goes up to $2,000. So you've got this kind of pressure rising, and I think when you do that, you can almost kind of slow down these moments and tell them in slow motion. There's a lovely quote from Lee Child where he talks about writing the fast stuff slow and the slow stuff fast. And I think when you've got a sort of fast moment, you can write it really slowly and really kind of just get as much kind of drama and kind of wring that out as much as possible. So I think probably here that could be brought out a little bit more. But I think it's a fantastic beginning to a story. And as I say, in particular, think about using different senses for a beginning. And if you can get the reader to use their imagination because you're starting with sounds rather than visual details, then that will help kind of really draw them in to the mix. So well done, Dennis. I really enjoyed it. And as I say, I would quite happily have carried on reading to find out what happens in the back of this van between the prisoner and his guards.
Cool. And that just about brings us to the end of the hour. Everyone, I want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, do check out Tom's course. The link is just below alongside the discount code for that was good for this weekend. Yes. So also thank you to everyone for sending in your first chapters. I'm sorry we didn't get around to everyone's, but also not because at this rate we probably would have maybe finished by the end of the year, perhaps, if we get rid of the sleep. I've got a few other things to promote. I realise I can share my screen now, so might as well highlight the fact that we've got some more lives coming up soon. I'm adding a few more, but we've got a launch of our short story magazine next week. We've got a webinar on writing scenes with Oksana Marfiotti, who's done a few of these before, and Tim Byrne. He's a fantastic book cover designer who joined us, I think, last year. He's seen some of his designs in the bookshop. He'll be doing a book cover critique, so if you've designed your own book cover or had one designed recently, you can submit it very much like this, and Tim's going to come on and sort of live review about 10 to 20 of them and give sort of feedback, first impressions, same sort of stuff here, but for book designs. Is there any sort of last thoughts you want to give, Tom, perhaps about the course starting next week?
It's starting the following week, if you will.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'm wishing for February to be over already.
Well, I think, I mean, the two things I always say, people ask you about, what are the secrets to writing? And I think the two things are: a writer writes, you have to write, you learn by writing. And the second thing is the importance of reading. We've gone through, different things that people have written this evening, but actually you can go back and do that same sort of analysis on writers and books that you like, and we try and do that on the course as well. But you can learn so much, and as much as someone like me can teach, I do always say that the books are the best teachers. So that's where I would start from. And if you wanted to join us in March, it would be a pleasure to have you with us.
Amazing. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving this a like and hit subscribe and the bell to be the first to find out whenever we're having another one of these. No doubt we're going to have another live editing session a little bit down the road, so we'll be welcoming Tom back for then. Until then, thank you everyone at home. Thank you, Tom. See you soon.
Thank you.